My name is Claire. I'm 35 years old, and 3 winters ago, my cousin accidentally added me to a family group chat I was never supposed to see. Inside were dozens of messages about a weekend trip. Everyone in my family was planning without me. Then I saw one line from my brother. "She never comes anyway." Underneath it, my mother reacted with a heart emoji. That should have been the worst part. But buried deeper in the messages was something else. A conversation about selling my grandfather's farmhouse. The same farmhouse they didn't know my name was legally attached to. And suddenly, after years of being invisible, my entire family had a problem they couldn't ignore. My name is Claire. I'm 35 years old, and 3 winters ago I found out my family had been planning their lives around my absence for years. It happened on a Sunday evening while I was sitting alone in a rental apartment outside Denver. I was there for work, managing a long hospital renovation project that had already stolen most of my weekends and nearly every holiday that year. Snow pressed softly against the windows, and I was halfway through cold pasta from a takeout container when my phone buzzed. Then it buzzed again and again. At first, I ignored it. I assumed it was another work thread from contractors arguing about permits or deadlines. But when I finally reached for my phone, I saw a family group chat I had never seen before. The title was simple: Cabin Weekend. My younger cousin Leah had accidentally added me. A second later, she sent a private message. "Oops, wrong person, lol." Too late. I had already started reading. There were dozens of messages. Reservations, grocery lists, discussions about who would bring wine and who would sleep in which room. My aunt asking whether Saturday or Sunday worked better for everyone. And buried between all of it were little sentences about me. "Don't mention it to Claire. She'll make it awkward if she knows. Just tell her we planned it last minute." One message from my older brother Daniel hit harder than the rest. "She never comes anyway." Underneath it, my mother reacted with a heart emoji. I remember sitting perfectly still after reading that. Not angry at first, just embarrassed. Because suddenly every excuse I had made for them over the years collapsed all at once. The forgotten invitations. The birthdays I learned about from social media pictures. The small gatherings that somehow included everyone except me. I used to believe adults simply got busy. I told myself people forgot things accidentally. I convinced myself distance explained everything. But those messages proved something else entirely. They remembered me enough to exclude me on purpose. That night I didn't reply in the chat. I didn't call anyone either. I simply screenshotted every message and sat there listening to the heater rattle against the apartment wall. Around midnight, I started thinking about my grandfather. His house sat on a quiet road outside my hometown in Vermont. Small white farmhouse, blue shutters, a wooden porch that creaked near the second step, no matter how many times he repaired it. I spent half my childhood there. My grandfather Edwin was the only person in the family who treated me like I mattered without requiring anything in return. He used to leave the porch light on whenever I visited. Even if I arrived after midnight from college or work, home should never feel locked, he always said. When he died 6 years earlier, the family gathered for the funeral, cried politely, ate casserole dishes in silence, and then went back to their own lives. Nobody talked much about the house after that, which was strange, because my grandfather loved that place more than anything. And suddenly, sitting there in that apartment with my phone glowing in the dark, I remembered something I hadn't thought about in years. A folder, a plain brown folder my grandfather handed me one autumn afternoon shortly before he died. "Keep this somewhere safe," he told me. I had forgotten about it almost completely. The next morning, before work, I called my landlord back home and asked him to check whether I still had a storage unit in town. I did. That weekend, I drove 4 hours back to Vermont through freezing rain just to open a metal storage door filled with boxes I hadn't touched in years. Inside one of them sat the brown folder. I opened it, sitting on the hood of my car. Most of it was boring paperwork. Insurance forms, tax receipts, old utility bills. But near the bottom was a folded document with my name typed neatly across the top. I stared at it for a long time before fully understanding what I was reading. 5 years before his death, my grandfather had transferred partial ownership of the farmhouse to me. Not verbally, not symbolically, legally. The document was notarized and filed with the county. My hands actually started shaking, because suddenly the family messages made sense. 2 days earlier in the group chat, my aunt had written, "The sale should close before spring." Sale. They were selling the farmhouse, and apparently nobody planned to tell me. I drove straight from the storage unit to the county clerk's office Monday morning. The woman at the desk looked bored until she searched the address and pulled up the records. Then she looked at me differently. "You're listed here," she said. "Listed, not as a visitor, not as a relative, an owner." Half the farmhouse legally belonged to me. I walked back to my car in complete silence. The strange thing is, I didn't feel victorious. I felt sad because my grandfather had known exactly what would happen after he died. He had known I would slowly disappear from family gatherings. He had known they would overlook me because I was the quiet one who never argued and never demanded space. So he protected me the only way he could, with paperwork. Over the next week, the phone calls started. My mother called first. Her voice sounded cheerful in that careful way people sound when they are hiding something. "Hey, sweetheart," she said. "Random question. Did anyone ever talk to you about Grandpa's house?" I looked out the window of my office while she waited. "No," I said calmly. "Why?" "Oh, no reason. Just organizing paperwork." Paperwork. That word almost made me laugh, because suddenly everyone cared about paperwork. Daniel called the next day pretending he wanted to reconnect. Leah texted me asking if I was upset about the cabin trip. My aunt emailed saying the family wanted to simplify some property matters. Nobody apologized. Not once. They simply panicked because the invisible person had unexpectedly become visible. For several days, I said nothing about the document. I listened carefully instead. And eventually the truth surfaced piece by piece. My brother had debt. My aunt needed money after a divorce. My mother wanted the farmhouse sold quickly before taxes increased again. To them, the house was an asset. To my grandfather, it had been a promise. One snowy evening, I finally drove back there alone. The porch still creaked near the second step. The mailbox leaned slightly left. And when I unlocked the front door with the old brass key hanging from my keychain, the smell inside hit me immediately. Wood polish, dust, coffee, memory. I stood in the hallway for almost 10 minutes without moving. Not because the house was grand or valuable, but because it was the only place in my life where I had never felt unwanted. A week later, the entire family gathered there unexpectedly after my mother insisted we talk like adults. The atmosphere felt polite and tense from the moment I walked in. Nobody met my eyes for long. Finally, my aunt cleared her throat. "We were surprised to discover your name on the deed." I nodded slowly. So was I. Silence. Then Daniel leaned forward. "You know Grandpa probably only added you temporarily." I looked directly at him. "The county records don't say temporary." My mother sighed dramatically the way she always did when conversations stopped going her way. "Claire, we're family. We shouldn't fight over property." That sentence almost broke me, because exclusion had apparently never counted as fighting to them. Only resistance did. I reached into my bag and placed printed screenshots from the group chat on the table. Nobody touched them, but everyone looked, especially my mother. Her face changed first, then Daniel's. Then Leah quietly stared at the floor. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't insult anyone. I simply said, "You already decided I wasn't family before this conversation started." The room stayed silent after that. Not dramatic silence, just the heavy kind that arrives when nobody can honestly deny what happened. In the end, I didn't sell my half of the farmhouse. I restored it. Slowly. New roof first. Then plumbing. Then the porch. I started spending weekends there alone with books and coffee and the quiet my grandfather loved. The family still talks to each other constantly. I know because sometimes I accidentally hear about trips or dinners after they happen. But something changed after that winter. Not them. Me. I stopped chasing invitations that were never truly meant for me. I stopped translating neglect into misunderstanding. And for the first time in my life, I understood something important. There are people who make room for you naturally. And there are people who only notice you when you stop standing quietly at the edge of the room. My grandfather knew the difference long before I did. That's why he left me the key.